The OSI teaches that everything in the universe happens according to the grand plan. But the stranger that arrived in Halcyon was an unplanned variable. From the moment he landed in Emerald Vale, his actions altered the course of history. The events on Tartarus brought about the end of the board's authority. But the board's mistakes would haunt the colony for decades to come. The damage they left behind would require the work of a generation to repair. Dr. Phineas Wells began reviving a handful of the Hope's colonists, engineers, scientists, technicians, and intellectuals. They were among the brightest minds the Earth had ever sent out into the stars. The Hope scientists and engineers woke up in a colony descending headlong into total collapse. With no way to return to Earth, they had no choice but to band together and devote themselves to the cause of saving Halcyon. The people of Halcyon were nothing if not hardy. In the absence of the board's authority, many of the colony's settlements banded together with a single purpose in mind: survival. Life was especially hard in the years to come. Some towns dissolved by attrition and starvation, but most of them found a way to carry on. In the years to come, Halcyon was forced to reckon with its newfound freedom. The board was gone, and for better or worse, the colony was responsible for its own destiny. Between MSI's worker-centric policies and the iconoclast's manpower, Sanjar and Zora were able to rally many of the Terra 2 townships to their cause. MSI's workforce swelled, and the iconoclasts enjoyed a significant surge in their ranks. The board was too distracted by infighting and internal politics to stop MSI from becoming a powerful corporation and a refuge for townships that might have fallen through the cracks. Bolstered by her status as savior of humanity, Lilia Hagen ushered Sublight Salvage to a new golden age. Her company grew bolder and more transparent over time, muddying the line between lawful and criminal for the entire colony. The Sublight family would thrive for years to come. In the end, after years of struggling against its own obsolescence, Edgewater lost a battle of attrition to plague, marauder attacks, and desertion. Edgewater was never visited by another stranger, with the exception of a small party of marauders who raided what was left of its cantina. Under the leadership of Junlei Tennyson, the Groundbreaker held firm against corporate influence. The ship's mechanical stability gave Junlei the time to educate a promising generation of engineers schooled in her family's traditions. The future of the Groundbreaker looks promising. The rediscovery of the Hope and the abandonment of the lifetime employment program forced Byzantium to come to terms with some uncomfortable realities about the state of Halcyon. While Byzantines were reluctant to surrender the luxuries they'd grown accustomed to, the board's diminished authority gave them little choice in the matter. Nearly everyone had to learn to make do with less. Some even had to get jobs. It was a dark time indeed. Even the Gorgon asteroid, though a distant enigma to most of Halcyon, felt the aftershocks of your actions. The destroyed Adrenatime synthesizer became a symbol of the board's cruelty and a rallying point for Wells and his scientists as they sought to build a more humane, ethical Halcyon. They cleared the dead from Gorgon's laboratories and repurposed them to aid in the crucial work of solving the colony's nutrition crisis. Gorgon, which had once sown death and destruction across Halcyon, became a source of hope and renewal. The Gorgon Project's final explosive end was bittersweet for Olivia Ambrose. She wandered the colony's fringes alone, searching for others like her who despised the board and meant to destroy them. In time, she found Phineas Wells and his cadre of scientists, and she joined them in their efforts to save Halcyon. For a while, she even knew an uneasy peace. But for all that, Olivia found purpose in Wells' project, She was always haunted by the memory of her daughter, Minnie, who hadn't lived to see the better world they were building. She never did forgive herself for the horror her work had wrought on Halcyon, but she remembered fondly the daring captain who'd put an end to it at last. In spite of everything, the Gorgon asteroid remained a sobering reminder of the potential for progress and disaster in humanity's most ambitious efforts. The Rizzo's company in Halcyon dissolved after the collapse of the board. The Eridanos atmospheric complex developed a notorious reputation as a derelict settlement populated by grinning killers. These stories kept the infection safely contained until a group of salvagers braved the complex and stole 20 crates of Spectrum Brown. Inside these crates, long-dormant parasites began to stir. In the absence of board regulation, Spectrum Brown made its way across the colony by passing hands between the desperate, the apathetic, and the lonely. The Hope scientists subjected the Eridanos parasite to intense research. Within a few years, they had successfully neutralized its most dangerous side effects. Spectrum Brown users could be identified by their permanent grins, but no longer experienced violent urges. After Spectrum Brown's widespread distribution, Spencer Woolrich experienced a sudden upswing in his popularity. Viewers found his on-screen conduct to be more boisterous, energetic, and personable than ever before. The wide grin constantly beaming from his narrow face certainly helped fit his friendly image. When asked about his newfound on-screen charisma, Spencer had this to say: "Happy workers lead to happy customers. Happy customers are repeat customers." Bertie Holcomb adapted to his new role as a host for parasitic slugs surprisingly well. Perhaps because he wasn't using his brain for all that much in the first place. The slugs put a swift, if unorthodox, end to Bertie's fears of being valued solely for his toss-ball skills. Of all the infected in the colony, Bertie's wild, beaming smile would always be the most genuine. The prophet of profitability was not spared from the infection quickly overtaking Eridanos. Due to her newfound chronic delight, the prophet was no longer able to effectively advise her clients on productivity. Her disciples, similarly bliss-enwrapped, lost interest in the hot, cold walks and hourly purges. Despite all this, the prophet's spirits were hardly dampened. After all, she no longer had the capacity to worry about any of her business rivals. Ellie savored her adventures on the Unreliable. Once they were done, she returned to life as usual, running missions of dubious legality, shunning respectable work, and living life to the fullest. She meant to reach out to her one-time captain, but she was always bad at keeping in touch. After all he'd seen and heard adventuring with you, the vicar Maximilian de Soto renounced his faith and joined the effort to rebuild the colony. Ironically, he finally found the joy that had eluded him over the course of his life, and realized that perhaps he was always meant to be just a simple laborer after all. He quickly dismissed the idea. Once the matter with the Hope colonists was resolved, Junlei bashfully asked Parvati if she'd like to join her permanently on the Groundbreaker, and Parvati enthusiastically, if somewhat awkwardly, agreed. The stories of her adventures spread across the colony, and Parvati soon found herself the center of attention. Having served as the engineer of a renowned spacecraft, tramp freighters and wildcat miners sought her out by name, and in no time, she was a fixture in the Groundbreaker's mechanical ecosystem. She and Junlei were never far apart. The SAM unit that accompanied you spread awareness of the product line's superior sanitation and maintenance capabilities across what was left of the colony. This led to a boost in SAM unit sales. Did you know that SAM units are the longest-lasting, toughest-acting cleaning solution in Halcyon? Minister Clark was released from house arrest, and his contact with you gave him a sense of renewed purpose and vigor. Once it became clear that no help would be coming from Earth, he threw his considerable efforts and talents into helping Halcyon manage the crisis before it. As for Dr. Phineas Wells, he spent his remaining years in his orbital lab. He eventually came to terms with his own past and was able to forgive the mistakes of his younger self by devoting his remaining years to serving the colony. Dr. Wells was able to revive many more scientists and engineers than he first expected, thanks to the additional batch of chemicals you stole from the ministry. Wells never forgot about the human lives that were lost in acquiring these chemicals. In the end, Dr. Wells was able to save every scientist and engineer aboard the Hope. Over the next decade, nearly all of the Hope's remaining colonists were successfully revived. Halcyon saw a period of rapid technological and scientific advancement. Breakthroughs in dietary supplements saved the colony from starvation. Geoengineering projects and social reforms began to change the structure and character of the colony. Dr. Wells laid the groundwork for the project to save the colony, but he would never live to see the fruits of his labor. He passed away a few years later. His work was carried on by the scientists and engineers he revived. Today, Halcyon has stabilized. The people of the colony work hard to adapt to their new circumstances. Nearby colonies send aid and supplies. Life will never be easy in Halcyon, but for the first time in its history, there exists a sense of real, genuine hope about the future. And what about you? The unplanned variable in the history of Halcyon. Long after Wells passed away, you carried on his work with more energy, determination, and brilliance than he could ever muster. The years that followed were hard, but Halcyon survived by the efforts of the Hope's most promising colonists, the greatest of which was you. No one knows what's happened to Earth, and no one knows what the future has in store for Halcyon. All we know for certain is this: the name of the Unreliable and that of its intrepid captain will remain the subject of countless stories for years to come.